Going on, guys? Sorry to keep you waiting. John Zannis, Bobby Manning, previewing Game 5 between the Celtics and the Heat, and the plot has thickened a good bit in the last 24 to 48 hours. Not only did the Celtics win Game 4, putting the game back in Boston and a chance to go 3-2 and then really make a series out of it, but another Miami Heat player is out. We saw him go down late in Game 4, Gabe Vincent. And he's already been ruled out. He's out for Game 5. In addition to him, you've got Kevin Love, who looks like, he's 72 years old, walking around, grabbing his back.
About 11 minutes last game.
Kyle Lowry hasn't been right either. So, I mean, a team that was already short has to do a ton of heavy lifting. So we're going to get into that. And we're just going to kind of preview state of mind where the Celtics are at right now. Bobby Manning's been with the team here and away. I went to shoot around this morning. Bobby was in the Heat shoot around talking to them. So we'll kind of report back on what we saw. I did see Malcolm Brogdon, a little bit of Malcolm Brogdon news as well. We will get into that also. And it is interesting. Celtics have had relatively good injury luck this postseason, not relatively, remarkably, almost unprecedented injury luck this postseason. But they are dealing with some guys who are a little dinged up. We got a better idea what's going on with Malcolm Brogdon. We'll talk about that as well. We do need to mention, show is brought to you, as always, by FanDuel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. Head over to FanDuel.com/Boston. Get involved in the action. Sign up now at FanDuel.com/Boston. Take advantage of this offer. A no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. You lose, you get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. We'll tell you more about this offer later on in the show. But first off, Bobby, just kind of your initial thoughts here. And again, let's rip through that news, everything that we have first. Vincent is out. He's been phenomenal.
Yeah.
This series.
Game 3.
Ridiculous. Game 3, absolute hero. Talked with Al today, said he's the best basketball he's been playing in his career. So there's no doubt that that's a thing. Before the Vincent news dropped overnight, it was learned that Malcolm Brogdon's been playing through a partial tendon tear in his right arm. Now, a partial tear is a sprain, just so everybody understands. Or, so he's got something going on there. Whether it's a surgical thing, whether it's a rest thing, who knows exactly what's going on. He's wearing a sleeve. You can see it. I was at shoot around today, Bobby. I saw him running around a little bit. What I saw, mainly working on mid-range, short-range stuff, was not extending himself out and warming up from 3. That doesn't mean he didn't do it all practice. Didn't mean he didn't do it when I was, when we were talking Al Horford. Just from what I saw, and that could also mean that was the portion of his warm-up where he was just working on the stuff inside. He was working on floaters with the right, with the left. Be interesting to see what happens here if he is limited or if the Heat know that they can sag way off him because he's hesitant to shoot the 3. Given his struggles, Jaylen Brown's struggles, it is worth, and Horford until last game, it is interesting to see if the Celtics strategy is just going to be jack it when you get it and how the Heat will defend. So a little bit of chess match stuff going on here, but start with the Vincent news, Bobby. I mean, you and I have talked on and off today. You think this is massive for the Heat?
Massive, because other guys are hurt too. They're playing through injuries, whether it's Max Strus or Kevin Love, as you mentioned, and Lowry did go down last game at one point with some sort of soreness, and I didn't see him at his shoot around this morning when they let us in. Tyler Hero, not close either at this point. I think you can officially, from what I saw today, rule him out for this series, no matter how long it goes. So how many bodies do you have? Like I said, you can count them on one hand, the amount of reliable guys left on the Heat team that concern you. Bam, Butler, Robinson, who I'm going to put on this list because I think he's played pretty well in this series. Strus, who's out there, not playing great, but still a guy you have to respect and defend and all of that. And then drops off pretty fast after that. I mean, what are we talking about here? It's not a deep roster anymore, and that's what they could count on. They could count on a bunch of different guys to contribute and fill in the scoring needed. Caleb Martin's the other one, of course, who I think kind of tweaked something last game himself. So how healthy are they going to look tonight? That's what I'm looking at. Who are they going to start in place of Vincent? It's probably going to be Lowry, but that disrupts your rotation where he's been in that bench unit that's done pretty well for them with Martin. I wouldn't think about starting Martin, but that's a possibility. I think with how well he's played, you want to keep him where he is. And then you have your next man up is Hayward Highsmith, who hasn't played all series. A solid defender, but not really an offensive player. A guy that the Celtics can probably ignore if he's out there. So here's the trade-off. You love this opportunity if you're the Celtics right now. The door is wide open for you if you stay hot to get back into the series, to take advantage of this injury luck you've been given now. But you're also facing just such long odds at this point because you can't slip up at all. You can't have a cold shooting night. You can't lose Brogdon for entire games like you have so far. They've been so fortunate to win in that last game without him doing anything, really. They survived an awful first half stretch with him out there. So that's the counter side to this Vincent news is what are you going to do about Brogdon here where he's, I'd say, almost unplayable. You have to, I think, start looking into Peyton Pritchard. You have to. No matter how cold, no matter how much of a target you think he is for Jimmy Butler, maybe you can do some Hauser stuff. I mean, that's the other guy we'll have to.
That's where you have to be smart, right, Bobby? Yeah. I think when in those Butler minutes, you have to be smart. I think you should have been looking at Hauser in those non-Butler minutes already. Yeah. I think you should have. And I think you have to look at Pritchard too. It is a fact. They will absolutely hunt Pritchard on every single possession. They're hunting a second team all defensive player, right. And they are.
So maybe he shouldn't be as good. You know how we've talked about before, when you have a mismatch out there and they're going after that guy, that team's getting out of their offense. And we've also talked about how if Butler's scoring 50 points and no one else is getting going, you're probably going to win. So I don't want to see a lot of Brogdon tonight. I get it. You want to fight through it. You want to be there for your team. You don't want to take a seat at this point in the playoffs with your team facing elimination. But this is part of the problem we're looking at here with Mazzulla is that if he wants to do that, Mazzulla can't be the one to say, all right, you got to sit down.
So we've talked about this before relative to it all reflects in, you just said Miami gets out of their offense. It's reflective in the Sam Hauser's defensive rating, which we all know this fabricated, this, stat that isn't in any way emblematic
of his actual. He hasn't played a second
of his actual defensive prowess, but the fact remains that, he had among qualified players the best defensive rating in the league, which is hilarious. But, we did talk about how teams hunt him and how it messes them up and how the Celtics were good enough to recover and help out and do whatever it took. And how it was disruptive. Jimmy Butler's not that guy, in the Miami Heat are not that team. They've openly shown you their hand and admitted that their offense oftentimes revolves around give it to Jimmy and let him figure out what to do. Either he's going to take a switch, hunt a matchup, get to his spot, and from that, he's either going to score or pass to an open shooter. And that is their offense. That they very much rely on it. So it does play into actually what Miami wants to do when you put that weak defender out there. They will find them, and they are at their best when Jimmy Butler gets to go to work because he's terrific at that. It's what he does. It's what it's what he excels at. It's what the Celtics, kind of want Tatum to be that, he isn't always able to do, is that guy who can just do the right thing with the ball in his hands and initiate the entire offense. So Miami will find it. The question is, what do you do in those situations? Do you change your tactic? Do you think about doubling? What's the rest of the lineup on the floor? Are you worried about them? You take Vincent off. Yeah, you've got fewer shooters out there. If Love isn't effective or not able to play as much, you might surrender a Kyle Lowry 3 to make sure that Jimmy doesn't eat Sam Hauser alive. There's things you can do. So you have to be smart. You have to look at who's on the floor and do it. If you think it'll be effective, there is a bit of a trade-off, but we'll see.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've been curious about in this series is how they're making these decisions on the fly. And the Celtics have certainly been limited in their double teams on Butler so far. The Heat, meanwhile, have gone to zone relentlessly against the Celtics and effectively. And that is the question I got absolutely eaten alive on, John, before Game 3 by Spoelstra. I was asking him, like who's initiating these zones? Like when are you going to these? What are the players looking for something? Are you calling it out from the sideline? And he's like, I don't know what you're getting at, but I answered this already. And he just stormed out of the room. But that does intrigue me is from the Celtics perspective, are they seeing opportunities to double, and are they empowered in those situations to do that? Are they leading the charge on a lot of these defensive coverages that they're playing on Butler? Because last game, I actually thought they did a very good job getting Rob in held positions against them. And he was able to get a hand on a lot of those short range jump shots that are almost automatic for him and leave him just a little bit off inside. They did a good job on Butler last game, I thought. And you know what it's got to be? If they don't want to double, and I know you're hesitant to do this because you don't want to tire him out, you got to have Tatum guard him. And Tatum's your best defender perimeter-wise for Butler because of the size. White can't do it because he's shorter, smart. You know, you're probably going to want him on a guard too, at least initially. So Tatum, I think, should see an increase in the positions he's on Butler. And you said this in the text thread earlier, John. Now that the Heat are so thin, you have to tire Butler out. And whether that's Smart or Tatum, you need a guy picking him up full court. Hell, Pritchard loves picking up guys full court.
Well, whether he's picked up full court, whichever defensive assignment he draws, I would have them run him ragged around off of screens, whatever it is. Just make him work for everything. You want a dragging ass Jimmy Butler on the court in that fourth quarter if that game is close, or you want to make it as hard on him as humanly possible and let other people beat you. You know, and what's interesting, Bobby, is like we talk about these tactics like if the Celtics need to do this to win, the reality is they actually don't. The problem is they have no margin for error, so they can't hold back. They are in a position now, especially with Vincent out. Vincent, Hero, Oladipo, a banged-up Love, a banged-up Lowry. This shouldn't be close. Yet we know that's not the case. We've seen them. We know
it's amazing.
We know they struggle with prosperity. We've seen them lose to a DeJounte Murray-less Hawks team that could have packed it in for the summer in Game 5 in Atlanta. We saw them lose at home to a Sixers team without Joel Embiid. We've seen this team not rise to the opportunity and play down to the level of the competition. I'm sorry. I'm a Miami believer. You know me. I wanted nothing to do with this team when it was a possibility. I am a Spoelstra believer.
You see my doubt starting to creep in again.
Yeah, I am a Butler believer. I absolutely believe in these guys and their ability to do whatever it takes to win and to do it at a high level. But they're just running out of bullets. You know, it's getting harder. You should be able to show up without gimmicks. Play your guys, play your game, and if you commit to things, both on the offensive and defensive end, you should be able to win. Shooting variance be damned.
So is there anything possibly psychological here from the Heat's perspective and saying, all right, let's sit down this guy. Maybe, you know, he's hurt, obviously. We saw it. But if he's sitting down, you get that news this morning if you're the Celtics, maybe just relax a little bit. They've been so prone to do that, and we know that the Heat are so psychologically driven that it's almost an advantage for them in that sense. And listen, they're thin. I don't even know where they're going to get the second unit production at this point. It's magical how they do it, and it's going to be magical again if they win this game because there's just so much beyond reason that led the Heat here that something beyond reason could keep pushing them forward. But I don't know. We're stacking up the points right now. Let's just add them up in terms of what they've contributed throughout the playoffs. Jimmy's at 30, so there's your 30. Bam's giving you about 18, so there's 48. You're up to like 62 with Vincent, so you're losing that. You're going to hope to get that from Martin. Hero's out. Oladipo's out. Strus is giving you 11, so that's 73. Larry's giving you 10. That's 83.
I know, but that's not how the math works, Bobby. I mean, we know that. So we got to, you know, it's not the point. The point is you need now big games from everybody or you're going to need, you know, a large Martin game, a large Strus game. You're not doing straight math here, but you're going to need Martin or Strus to have big offensive games. But I mean, what does that even matter if Butler has one of his 40-something games, you know? So, like, ultimately, that doesn't matter. It's just simply they're running out of scoring outlets, which means, you know, you can really, really focus in on what you need to do in order to defend. If you're getting beat, you know, with the lowest caliber guys, I mean, but again, you can't relax. Somebody put in the comment, doesn't matter who's out, you can't relax. I'm at no point suggesting the Celtics relax. I'm saying is they don't need to resort to new strategies and gimmicks necessarily to win. They should, from a personnel standpoint, if they play well or play their game, shots falling or not, be able to exert their will here, because they just simply they're just going to be short. The Heat are just going to they just don't have enough guys. So
you need to lock in
and when that
defensively.
second, I mean, all of their guys, all of their starters are going to have to play. Strus, Butler, and Bam are going to each have to play 44 minutes tonight. 43. I mean, it's, you know.
So are you still in that desperation spot tonight? Obviously, you're going to be out of the playoffs if you lose here, and you should be playing at that level. And I know our friend Brian Barrett tweeted out some of the defensive ratings from the elimination games. They've just been incredible, like sub 100 stuff in these elimination games. 90 against Philly in the game 6, 95 against Philly in the game 7, and 105 last game. If you defend like that, that's why I'm throwing out the math. On average, these Heat guys, it's going to add up to less than 100 probably. And if you really clamp up on them, it definitely will. So at that point, you just need 100 points. You need a dead average or even well below average night from your offense to win this game here. So it really is all about the Celtics. Like,
It is, but it's
the Heat would have to do something unimaginable tonight to put up
it's
enough
not
points to
though.
beat
It's
you.
just, but that's the problem is the no. If this were the series the rest of the way, you'd be like, all right. But look, we thought the Heat didn't stand a chance just simply because they were already down Hero and Oladipo, and they were really going to struggle to be able to keep up. And it didn't happen. The problem is it comes down to you can't let up, and you can't let the shooting variance be the thing that beats you here. You cannot let the Heat have free and open looks all night and just hope you hit more of yours. That cannot be the approach. If they lax, they take the Celtics have proven they're not good enough. Sorry. They're the more talented team, but they're not good enough to win on talent alone. That's been proven. The problem is they think the latter is true. They can win on talent alone, and they cannot. They have enough talent that when they play their A game, they're a very difficult team to beat. That's where they've gotten confused all season long. This is not a world-beating team. It's not. It's not one of the all-time greats, even if they end up going on to win a title. It's a team that's got a pretty good collection of talent in a year where there's a tremendous amount of parity in the NBA, and there's a lot of teams at or around their level talent-wise. They're not head and shoulders above the next team. They're not. So they have to go out and play. It's been proven against Miami because Miami will eat your lunch if you don't. So I'm still not super confident, but it is interesting that, you know, the whole don't let us win one thing, Bobby. It's not the cliche as much as it is like it's a different series. If the Celtics go and do what they should do in game 5 against an undermanned Heat team, you're in a situation where it's head back to Miami, play for your life, and you're on to game 7. So if you look at it in a one game at a time, that was the point. You win that one, you stay alive. You come back here and you win tonight. Things have completely changed right now. So there's no margin for error, but every single time these two teams take the court, you expect the Celtics to win.
Yeah, and it will come down a lot to the margins, too, that we always talk about, and that other teams have used against them, the offensive rebounding. Got to keep Bam off the boards.
Yeah.
The turnovers have just been absolute killers.
Value possessions, for the love of God.
Because that is a way the Heat can win, is to build up like a 10-20 shot advantage over you. That's how they did it early in the series. And then it was, of course, the crunch time question. If you do go to a close game late, that's where you've lost these home games in the playoffs. I mean, they're plus 5.6 on their home court, but they have a losing record. And that's because they have a minus 5.9 in crunch time on their home court. So you do want to be able to put this away before you even run into that uncertainty here as we lose John. I'm confident, John. I'm getting a little confident here because I just think the guys that the Heat have to lean on now have been so unreliable. And you do have questions across your rotation, but I do believe in what Grant's doing right now. And I think he's firmly in that rotation. You're starting to, I think, build the rotation you want to play here, whether that's Rob off the bench with that second unit and him doing what he's doing against Butler. I think that's a plus right now that you have on hand. It just comes down to who's going to do a lot of the facilitating offensively, because I think that is the number one thing, John, is controlling the ball, not giving it away, not giving the Heat those runouts. As great as the second half was last game, Tatum and Brown on the ball and just making these bad decisions and over dribbling, you can't do that to start tonight's game, because then the Heat are going to start believing again. You need to run such great offense early that you put them in a 15, 20-point hole. And if they're going to come back, it's going to have to be something miraculous. You got to really just knock them down early in this game.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's so, I hate to like say how simple it is. But just don't play like assholes. I mean, It's like, you know what I mean? It's like, again, it's not automatic. You can lose if you play the right style by your shot's not falling and theirs not falling. But when you make it hard on yourself, when you dribble too much, as these guys do, when you don't move the ball like they did in the second half, it's harder. Those possessions become harder. The other team gets turnovers. They get transition. They get going the other way. You miss all of your shots. There's transition buckets going the other way. You don't lock down on defense. You let them have open shots. They're going to hit a higher percentage of those shots. You have a game where you do everything you want to do and Miami is just red hot and you're ice cold and you lose. Well, that was your fault for allowing this to get to this point, and that's how you lose the series.
Yeah.
You don't have that margin for error. There's always the puncher's chance sort of game where we did everything right. We got every look we wanted. Shots didn't fall. Theirs did. You go home. That absolutely can happen. But you increase the possibility of losing this game when you don't play when you don't do those things, when you do what they did in the first half versus what they did in the second half. Because again, what happened the first half, Bobby? Celtics turned it over too much. They dribbled too much into traffic. They got plenty of threes. They just weren't knocking them down at an elite clip, but it was around 36. Miami did not hit their shots. They were shooting 31% in that half from three-point land. Yet Miami was winning because you hadn't committed to defense and you weren't getting the quality of threes that you wanted. Everything changed about both their defensive approach and the way they went about getting those shots in the second half. And that's how they ended up going on to win. I know everyone's going to look at it and be like, well, the shots fell. Their approach was different.
The approach was different.
You have a much better chance of that being effective than not. It's not just the shots falling. It's what they did to have them fall and what they did to keep Miami from getting into any sort of rhythm. They can do that to teams. They can frustrate teams. They can make it hard on teams. They have to do it. It's as basic as it is, but Johnny says it here. It's defense and ball movement. Both teams want to play this way, but the Celtics have proven when they do that, they're close to unbeatable. They are. They have been this year. It's very rare when they do that and they don't win.
Yeah, and I keep going back to Joe now, and we'll certainly have that conversation again tonight if they lose. But all year talking about how the offense is going to set up the defense and your shot selection and doing all these different things to not turn the ball over. It just seems so backwards to me, where you always think if you're killing it on the defensive end and turning defense into offense, you're setting yourself up for success on the offensive end. You have advantages in transition, and he talks about that stuff too. But the first half where you're just looking for those quick threes, the second half of game 3 where you're doing the same thing, you're just so flat and you're so easy to guard. Second half, like you said, the approach changed. Tatum got into that mid-range area against the zone. He played a very flexible game. Smart's involved setting him up. You finally saw a Smart Tatum roll, which I feel like we haven't seen in like 10 games. You had multiple passes. The amount of 3-4 pass possessions, if you look back, compared to just like 1 or 2 across the three-point line to find a 3, those things make a big difference to me. And when they're playing in flow, when they're playing in rhythm, that's when they really get dangerous and the Heat can't keep up. When they're flat and just tossing shots up, on both ends, defensively, I think they've been flat for a lot of this series. That's where you empower the Heat, because the Heat do have a deadly transition game too. So a lot of the series to me is flowing from defense to offense, whereas Joe keeps looking at it and saying, like, let's do this on offense so we get set up on defense, and it's not working. I just hope they're flexible tonight, because the Brogdon thing is going to force them to be.
Yep.
If he's bad early, you got to get him out of there. And
Yep.
then, you got to be able to find lineups and rotations and combinations and stuff that work. Same for the
Yeah.
Heat. Tonight's going to be a coaching game, unfortunately. The Heat are going to have to scheme up to counteract this Vincent absence, and the Celtics going to have to find another producer to replace Brogdon, I think.
Yeah. So you're 100% right. The Brogdon thing does, it's an added wrinkle here because it does change the dynamic a little bit and what they need to do. We'll talk about the Brogdon injury and what we think it means in just a second. First off, again, we want to remind you at home, for those interested in getting involved in the action here, you can head over to FanDuel right now during the NBA playoffs, because new customers get that no sweat first bet we're talking about, up to 1,000. That's 1,000 in bonus bets when your first bet doesn't win. All you have to do is go to fanduel.com/Boston, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. And it's not just that, honestly, Bobby. You head over there, you get different promotions every single day, in addition to this kind of welcome bonus that you get here. It's a super safe app. You know that you get paid right away. So if you are interested and you do want to get in on the action, especially now here in Massachusetts that sports betting has been made legal, FanDuel is definitely the place to go. As we said, take advantage of this offer when you sign up through our exclusive URL here, fanduel.com/Boston. Get 1,000 in no sweat first bets. So the Brogdon thing is interesting, Bobby, because, he's obviously been off. We know it. We've seen it. He doesn't look right. I'll put up a little bit of B-roll of him today. I just want to make sure the volume is nice and down here. Little bit of B-roll of him today, and you can see him over there, right?
I don't see him.
You're not seeing the B-roll?
Might just be me.
Oh.
Yeah, Tim doesn't see it either.
Okay, my bad. I see it, but I'll get it off the screen. I'll jump back to it. He was working on his mid-range. He's got that little thing there. I mean, he doesn't look like a cripple. It's not like he's in pain, but it's clearly affecting that long-range shot. We've seen not only the misses, he's incredibly short. He already has a release that's a little bit out in front of him. It looks a little bit like a shot put. It looks increasingly so in these last few games, Bobby. It looks like he has to put in a lot of extra oomph just to get it to the basket. It doesn't even look close. He's, in fact, been short on almost all of his shot attempts. So there's something off. The thing to him is not just playing through the pain, but it's probably recognizing how he has to adjust physically on his release point and everything that he's doing to compensate for whatever weakness he has in that area right now, and instability that's causing that shot, that's causing him to have a difficult time getting it there. He can hopefully get it there, but I mean, it's a problem.
Yeah, it's interesting how it happened too, and hopefully we'll talk to him at some point tonight. Jared wrote last night that it started as
Diving for a
golfer's
loose
elbow,
ball. Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
boxing out Kevin Love, he tore it in game 1.
Right.
So since that point, and it makes sense, he really hasn't been able to hit anything offensively, and it's concerning. He's already been, I think, a guy who struggled in a lot of defensive matchups so far this postseason. He wasn't a great defender throughout a lot of the regular season. But, you finish game 1 with 19. Game 2, he manages through it and gets 13. So if you can get something like that from him tonight, great. But game 3, 0. Game 4, 2. I mean,
it's bordering on unplayable.
Yeah, I know Pritchard, a lot of the time when they put him out there, and you can throw Hauser into this too. They don't need to play another guard. Smart and White are fine. Those guys are going to give you more offensively. Hauser at least than
Grant steps into the 7, and Brogdon becomes. Sadly, Brogdon it messes your second unit up a little bit with White starting, Bobby. But Brogdon's got to become the 12-minute guy, and Grant's got to become your 25, 26, 28-minute guy. It just is what it is.
I think that's what they've done the last 2 games.
And that's what they've done.
Yeah.
There's no other way around it. The question is, can you survive some Pritchard in the some Pritchard slash Hauser in the non-Butler minutes? But yeah,
you're still talking about 17, 18 there that Brogdon's had to fill. So that's where Pritchard and Hauser come into play. And this is another thing with Joe. You don't know how to use those guys right now. You haven't played them in this series. They're cold. They have to come in now and in short minutes do something for you. And Brogdon's great at that. Maybe you just roll with him in that spot. But if it goes like the last 2 games, you're not going to see a lot of them in these second halves. It's puzzling to me that they haven't played Hauser at all up until this point. It's not like I'm the biggest Hauser fan going, but it makes sense in the series. And it makes sense in the big picture, John. I was listening to Howard Bryant on a podcast after Game 4, and he's like, this team, they want to put up 1,000,000 threes, and they don't use their best shooters. Especially in this series, like there's places to hide Hauser on the Heat. And like we talked about, defensively, you almost don't hate Butler going at him. But is that just what's terrifying Joe from the sideline, that matchup happening over and over and over again? You have to play to your strengths. And in this series, it looked like Hauser could have been a guy who would get your 3-point game going. And they were at 29% through the first 3 games. We'll see. Like, do you picture him playing at all tonight?
Or it's so hard to dust somebody off after all this time, Bobby. The problem with Joe is he wants it both ways. He wants to be a 3-point shooting team, but he wants to make sure that he doesn't leave himself vulnerable to to mismatches defensively. It doesn't work that way. The argument on behalf of playing Hauser last year and at any point during the time this year is, does the good outweigh the bad? What it does, just not in terms of his ability to knock down threes. It's not always necessarily contingent on whether he's hot or not. Holistically, on the entire team, does that type of offense, having that threat, having them have to be honest and stick out on that shooter and not be able to leave him and not be able to switch and not be able to clog the paint and not be able to do some of the things you do when you know there are shooters all over the floor, does that open things up for your other players and create opportunities? It's not just, well, Hauser missed his first 2. Does the presence of shooters out there change what you can do offensively?
Especially against the zone.
And especially against the zone, what we've noticed here is a couple of things. The double big lineup really struggled when Horford couldn't shoot, particularly when Marcus is on the floor, because at that point you were talking about 3 non-shooters. That's not even to mention Jaylen Brown being dreadful, which you don't which you don't expect, but it's a lineup that cannot stretch things out based on the personnel on the floor, and at least this series so far, how cold some of the other players. And again, let's be serious. Both Brown and Tatum had subpar shooting years from 3, even though Brown was considerably better in the last third of the season. But your best shooters have been, Brogdon, who now isn't capable of it, Horford, who's been ice cold, and this series it's been White. So if you want to run that approach where you're getting up a ton of threes, or you want to be a team that has that in your identity, you have to sacrifice somewhere, which means you got to get those guys on the floor. That includes Grant. That includes Hauser. That includes Pritchard. If that's who you want to be, Joe, that's who you have to play. But you put out lineups like, Rob Smart and Al, that's a freaking disaster, So yeah. I'm not really sure. When Miami goes zone against those second units, when Tatum's off the floor, why are you not putting shooters out there?
So
why,
here's the
why is that not the spot where you're putting your Hauser or somebody?
So this is what Joe needs to solve tonight if Brogdon can't go, especially in the second half, because we know he's going to play in the first half and see how it goes. Second half, it's that early fourth, right? You have to think the Celtics are going to have a lead going into the fourth tonight, as they did in Game 3. Tatum takes a seat that first stretch of the fourth last game, and they just died. And they've done that for a lot of this series, the Brown on, Tatum off minutes. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but they can't be pretty, especially offensively. So in those moments, Pritchard's a guy who can handle the ball a little bit. Maybe trust him in that spot. I know it's scary, especially facing elimination, but these other things you've done haven't worked. And you had to get Tatum on so fast, especially now where you're you're looking at needing 3 wins to win the series in a row. You're going to need to squeeze in some rest for Tatum in some spots here. And honestly, Brown has played so poorly in this series. Wouldn't be the worst idea to minimize him a little bit either in some of these spots, especially against that zone. You're kind of just running into a brick wall, as you said, John, there, running the lineups and the game plan that you are in
Right,
those
that's the thing.
minutes. It's like
Yeah.
you're sacrificing them. So don't go out there and make this a 5-point game midway through the fourth because you died the first 4 minutes of the fourth. Then Butler's coming off the bench, and here comes 5 mid-rangers. You can almost see how it's going to play out, John, tonight before it even happens.
Yeah.
They're going to be up fourth quarter, early minutes. You're blowing it against the zone. And then final 8 minutes, can you hold off that Butler charge without just dribbling the ball out? It's scary to think about how this is going to play out tonight, despite all the advantages you have. And so much of it is just a little bit of stiffness from the coaching on the sideline. And I've defended Joe all year, but the lack of creativity is just maddening.
The creativity and just recognizing on the fly what's happening and countering, if you've got better personnel, you should be able to counter these moves. Because look, zones are gimmicky. A zone is, I don't have the horses to compete, so I'm going to throw this at you and see if I can just hang in there a little bit longer. Hopefully it'll kind of mess you up a little bit. But like, you should be able to eat it alive. And, and to credit Spoelstra's credit, he's messed around when he's done it. One game he does it second and fourth quarters only. And again, I think a lot of times targeting those non-Tatum lineups. Game 3, he doesn't play at a lick. Or was it game 2, he didn't play at a lick? No, game 3, he doesn't play at a lick. And that the Celtics probably game planned for it, and that probably messed them up too. But it's not just Joe. It's also the players on the floor. Recognize what you have to do. Recognize, instead of trying to drive into the teeth of it, to just camp your ass out in the middle of it and take those elbow jumpers and those pull-up free throw line jumpers. And they started to do that a little bit, which is great because, me, like I love my mid-range. Like, I'm not obsessed. It's you need to have a whatever it takes approach. John Corrales, had a funny, metaphor talking about the Celtics on one of his podcasts, talking about, them being pandas who only eat bamboo, instead of eating everything. Like, if you take it away from them, they die. If the Celtics only can win one way and you take that away, they're dead.
You keep talking about that Spoelstra cut from the timeout or
yeah,
whatever.
the Spoelstra cut from the thing. Guys, stop, run them off the line, keep them from shooting their threes, and they can't beat you. So, like, they've become so predictable that they know all you have to do is this. So learn to win more ways. Like, you have personnel that can do other things. You're not like, it's not like that it's one guy and 4 Kyle Korvers out there and all you can do is shoot threes. You have players that can do other things.
Right.
Do those other things. Don't be reliant on that one thing. It's silly to me. Like, when you can take advantage, run Tatum in the post occasionally. Spot up from mid-range. If you've got a smaller defender on a switch, and shoot right over the top of them. These are things that should be automatic. Like, do you think Jimmy Butler is like, I can only shoot from here? He dribbles around until he gets to a spot he feels comfortable.
This is what I'm talking about.
And he hunts a guy only a couple inches shorter, and he just gets his shots off.
They're so flexible on the Miami side. They're running different stuff within possessions. If something doesn't work, they're able to pivot to something else. Meanwhile, the Celtics are just like, we gotta get this open 3.
Yeah,
where is it?
This question here in the chat, the answer is unequivocally, and yes. Not only do we think it, Joe has said it outright.
I think Brown and Brogdon are free to take them. And
Joe has admonished them for not shooting enough threes. He does not like those shots. Even in wins, we didn't get up enough threes. We got away from what we do. Again, it's not, you can't just be about one thing. You got to be about everything. When the ball is moving and they're running around and you're able to make that extra pass and get that good look from 3, those are great. But otherwise, if another team's trying to run you off the line and defending the perimeter really well and not respecting that you're going to be able to do anything else, do something else. The analytics are right. And the numbers are right. And the numbers are right, When you score, the numbers are incredible. Like, not only for what the Celtics do, but, just league wide. When a team hits 3 or more threes than someone else, their record is like, they win 77% of the time. It's insane. The math is right on it, but you still just have to go about it the right way. You got to make sure you take your threes when you're supposed to take your threes. And when that opportunity is not there, do something else. They can't be so reliant on it. So as you said, Bobby, and as Joey says here, it's the little things. It's the stuff in the margins. It's the value every single possession. Don't be cute. Don't lax on defense and let them kind of, get back in transition, keep the pace up. Don't get stuck dribbling with your head down and trying to do it all yourself. All of these little things here,
Yeah, and if you don't do these things, you deserve to lose. I mean, it's unfathomable that they keep laxing on these things, given the breaks they receive, given the disasters they've avoided already in the playoffs, going to a Game 7 against Atlanta or losing to Philadelphia. They've gotten away with a lot, and maybe it is, as we've talked after Game 3, the fact that they haven't had to learn from that with a massive failure season yet, and that might still be what it takes out of this series. Odds are they still aren't going to win this series, John. I know we're all pumped up for tonight. They have a great opportunity in front of themselves to do something no one's ever done. But more likely than not, they're probably going to. I mean, I have them losing in 7. So Josue has them losing in 6.
They get to 7, they're not losing in 7.
All right. I mean, fair enough. But odds are they're going to lose.
If they lose the series, it's in the next 2 nights. That's my vibe.
And it doesn't matter how far you get. If you force 7 and you lose, maybe you're like, all right, there's a response here. If Joe, shows you something here, there's some guys who can be saved. Maybe you feel a little better about keeping Brown, or all those offseason conversations we'll have. But at the heart of it, the fact that they're still in play to lose this, the fact that they have no margin for error when they suddenly have this huge break. I mean, you had to grab one of those first 3 games to be in a 2-2 spot right now where Vincent goes down and you're like, oh, great, we just got to win 2 of these next 3. You still got to rattle off 3 straight here. And even just some simple stuff like shooting variance or a few bad turnovers or a few bad minutes at the end of the game are going to cost you your season.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about all this stuff. And I do hope we have a series here. I want to go back to Miami. I want to keep the finals in play. I mean, you get to the finals, everything's fresh and you're on your home floor Game 1. But it's so hard right now, and the Heat are still so confident. Jimmy's talking. We didn't even play those cuts about Jimmy. I guess he was like playing music and drinking wine after last game. I mean, those guys aren't worried at all. Even today at shoot-around, just very confident group. You got to instill some doubt in them. You got to do the little things as you talked about, John, because you're not above them. You keep losing when you don't do those things. And you're not going to win a championship with this arrogance, because we're still talking about that, right? The expectation for this group is championship. I know Denver is looking like a world beater. I know that they're going to be probably favorites over you, I think, in most people's minds, even if you do get there with what you have to go through right now. So it's just frustrating. I mean, you've already blown a golden opportunity here, it feels like. You just got another one. And can you take advantage of it? It just starts with tonight. And I do like hearing Smart in the locker room after the last game saying, just win a quarter at a time. Like, we just got to take this quarter by quarter. You win the majority of the quarters in the game, you're probably going to win that game, and then you just take it from there. But this is still, even though I'm feeling good about it, I feel good about there being a 7 at this point. It's still just so daunting what they have to do here. And the Heat still have enough. Like, if they can grind defensively, if they can throw you off their game, if they can be unpredictable, they have enough to close out this series. All they need is one over the next 3.
Yep, they do. They do. I don't think anybody can feel good. They can't. Like, you can't be a Celtics fan and feel confident ever. Even if you win the next 2 games by blowouts, you're going to enter game.
Because of what got you here.
You're going to enter Game 7. You're going to be like, I don't know. So that's who they are. That's their identity. That's who the Heat are. You got to give them a ton of credit, and I will, and I do, because they're doing it to you. This is not all self-inflicted. They're playing really good basketball, and that's totally fair. Like, you can still play a good game and they can beat you.
I understand them feeling the way they feel, given what they've done on the road, given what they've done being shorthanded. But these should all be massive advantages for the Celtics.
They should,
and they haven't.
and
that's why you're going to be looking at this series and saying, what the hell happened?
You still haven't seen the Celtics fully impose their will. You saw a game in which in the second half where shots fell. And yes, I do believe they played really good defense.
So why is it? We're gonna get into this when the season ends, John. But why all year were they so lax, so nonchalant, and just dysfunctional for what they have?
I believe that I blame all of the fans out there, the bobos who just won't listen to anything critical ever and pump them up and make them think that they're the greatest thing in the world. I think it goes back to the same thing I said before. I'm not kidding. They 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 are the most talented team, but talent alone is not enough to win, and so they couldn't disabuse themselves of that, notion that all I have to do is show up and win. They couldn't do it. They stay no matter what. They show up each day thinking we got this, not we're going to work for this. It's just a mentality, and a lot of times it works because they are good enough, but that they don't have it. And you want to say, well, last year's coach made sure. I agree with that. I think then partly they did have a guy who kept them in check last year and made them do the thing that's harder, which is focus on defense and requires constant work and effort and would get on their ass if they didn't play defense versus Joe, who wouldn't get on their ass for it and say it was fine. We just need to shoot more threes. That doesn't take as much effort. Joe, for what it's worth, kind of almost gave them an excuse for all of their failures, just being like, well, the shots just didn't fall. He played the shooting variance game with them, and I don't know how much of it they believed, but for whatever it's worth, whether they and I say this a lot, Bobby. I say you can't make excuses for Tatum and Brown. They're veterans. They're 6 and 7 years in at this point. So they're veterans. They're not kids anymore. However, they are still young enough to not recognize that this doesn't happen all the time. You're not guaranteed a spot in the Eastern Conference Finals. I've said from the get-go that they're basically spoiled rich kids when it comes to basketball success. They were born into a team that went to the conference finals almost every year. They just expect that this is their right to get here and to play for it. And if they show up, great. But they're not. They don't understand what it takes to get to that next level, and they might not get it until they're in their 30s and say, "Oh crap, we pissed that chance away." They're used to making excuses for their failures, pointing to refs, talking about traffic, as we talked about there. There's a lot of different things. But here's the other thing I will say. Like, you don't know it's that whole cliche, Bobby, of like, you either define the moment or the moment defines you. Like the 2004 Red Sox that people have, kind of been drawing these comparisons to. Nobody knew that's what they had in them. Nobody. When they lost 19-8 to the Yankees in Game 3, we all left the stadium that day like, oh, God, what an embarrassing.
They're just not good enough.
They're just not good. The Yankees are their daddy. They're not good enough. That's how we all felt. They became that gritty team after they won.
And this is different, right?
You
know the Celtics are way better than the Heat.
They are,
but not even close.
But that's how this works, is after you do it, then we call you tough and gritty. For some reason, fans and they themselves and a lot of people surrounding the team have anointed them already for something that they haven't earned or deserved yet. So go do it first. And then people can talk about you being tough and gritty and wanting it more and being those guys and getting there. Okay.
All the accolades too. I know Nick hates
they've shown moments, flashes of it. The Milwaukee last year, winning Game 6, ballsy. Tatum, massive check mark on his resume. Big boy moment. Okay. But they've also shown caving in or creating unnecessary drama to get themselves to that point and making things harder on themselves. It's that inconsistency. So they man up here and they win these next 3, Bobby. Yeah, they've rewritten the story about themselves. They go down with a whimper in Game 5 tonight after having eked out Game 4. That's going to define very much what people think about who they are. So it's kind of gut check time right now. I think they've just gotten used to it. They've had built-in excuses. Jaylen Brown injury a couple of years ago, where they were already an underdog to Brooklyn, but Brown goes out. You knew they were dead in that series. A couple of years prior to that, the year before the bubble, the Kyrie Irving season, and him just quitting on them and everyone hating one another. There's been built-in excuses along the way. This is the first time there's no excuse for them. It's the first time they're kind of face to face with their own choices and limitations based on what they're willing to sacrifice. And if they go down, they'll be defined by it. If they win, they'll be defined by it. It's a really big moment for them.
Yeah, and I wonder if those expectations are hindrances to certain people, in the building, especially Joe. Do you have to play it safe if you're him, given the expectations you face? I certainly think the way he coached early in the season reflected a guy who I think just didn't want to rattle too much. And maybe they didn't try different things throughout the year that they could have utilized now to kind of save themselves, or alternate ways of playing or something like that. Like this very narrow approach. And I do wonder how much of it comes from above in terms of the analytics. It just everything you talk about there, John, I think reflects a lack of leadership here. And I know that's a very vague thing. It's a very cliche thing.
I hate that. I hate that we are talking in cliches, but some of it actually applies, Bobby, with some of this stuff. I hate the whole heart and grit and wanted it more and leadership stuff because it's so easy to lean on it. It's almost like you're doing that in place of actual basketball analysis. There are basketball reasons why they're losing, but sometimes it is as simple as the ball was laying on the ground and that guy dove for it and you stood there and watched him. Like sometimes that's how it works,
And that's a big story in this series. There's no doubt about that. They're ignoring little things. They seem above it, as you say. And so who's going to convince them that they do need to do those little things? They might be beyond convincing at this point, given everything you said that's happened. They think that they're amazing. They think that they've accomplished stuff. And I think that you see that after game 4 too. All right, you want to be happy after that win, great. But it almost seemed like that the one win that they got there was the comeback in full. The way a lot of these guys reacted. And again, I'm not saying to sit there and be mad and stoic and all of that after the game. It was a great win, but we got together, we worked things out at the team meeting. All these reports out there, none of them are true. And just the defiance to the issues at hand here. I mean, they're still in a huge, huge hole. And I hope they feel that and they believe it going into tonight. Because you know what, John? If they do collapse tonight, it's going to be an all-time boo. Like, we remember some of those boos in 2021 when they would just collapse every other night. And it seemed like this thing wasn't going to work anymore. It's going to rival those if they either don't show up tonight or bow out late in a bad collapse, because those really are the only two ways I can see them losing here.
For whatever the Celtics this series have spent all of their credits. That's it. It's like
nobody trusts them anymore. No one believes in them.
You even see it from the diehards, the people who would give us crap from time to time if we were critical or too critical. I'm far from taking a victory lap because I want to see. We say what we see. Okay, when you see it, you talk about it. It's what it looks like. But they have a chance to undo that. This isn't like an "I told you so" thing. There have just been questions along the way. It's whether you choose to talk about them, acknowledge them, and hope that they can get through them as a fan or as someone who follows the team, covers the team, or whether it's going to eat them up. That's why we talk about these things along the way. It's not to say these guys stink and they're brutal and this and that. They're showing tendencies of a team that isn't necessarily serious all the time, maybe not willing to pay the iron price.
And this is a great test.
Right. And so you gotta show it. And so this is the first one where they kind of got exposed. And I do think a lot of fans were like, what's wrong with these guys suck, because you're supposed to win here, the path to the finals was paved for you again, by injuries and matchup luck and a lot of different things here. There's no excuse. I don't care about Joe and Ime and this and that. There's no excuse at this point other than themselves.
Excuse, especially at the health you talk about and the matchups you've received and all that. This is a great test for that too, because there will be a temptation to run this back, especially if you get to 7 and it's a close game and you lose or whatever. You have to win this series, I think, to bring this core back and believe in it again, because all you've done for so long is get away with things. That something's going to have to break at this point, I think, to change this group's mentality. And that's really what it's about at this point. Yes, we know Brown and Tatum can work on the court. We know that this team can win. We know that this team can thrive and finish number 2 in offense and defense. At this point, can they win a championship? And they keep falling so short of that mark.
Yeah.
I know you don't want to be whimsical in how you proceed after this, but I do think if you don't win this series, as you said, it's a spot that you should be thriving in, and you're not for some reason.
Yeah, you have to start to kind of look inward and say, why is that? And honestly, I really do believe.
On the other hand, if you're just so good that you're going to prevail in these spots, then come back down 0-3. And if you do that, I think you look at the talent on board here and say, is this team just so good that you have to just run it back every year in spite of all these problems and hope you catch a break? Because, yes, you're catching some breaks right now, but you always need to catch a break no matter who you are to win a championship. So if this team's just so loaded, even though they're so dysfunctional, maybe just run it back year in and year out and say, let's catch a couple breaks and maybe we'll win a couple championships out of this.
I'm not a reactionary guy. Sometimes I think a couple of years ago I said run it back, and they did, and they went to the finals. I'm not always a if you win and if you lose, but you ask questions and then you open your eyes to possibilities. Okay. And so you have to rethink, in your mind, if certain people are untouchable, you have to think whether or not, oh, I don't know. If you think you always wanted to build your core and you think that a certain group of players are perfect together, you might have to question that combination. And you have to keep your eyes open to the possibility. It doesn't mean you go just trade Jaylen Brown because you didn't win this year and make yourself worse. It's just dumb. Yeah. Every season I look at it as say, can I get better by doing this? And you do it. So I don't think you react, but you are going to have your whatever preconceptions, whatever thoughts you have about the players there, you are going to start to question whether there's a missing ingredient at the very least.
That's it. So how do you tap into the intangible thing that you're missing?
The problem with this team being who they are and the way they've been, look, being able to add a Derek White and a Malcolm Brogdon are freaking miracles to a team like this, okay? You're maxed out and tapped out. You don't have draft picks and you don't have money. So you have what you have. So if you recognize
nothing is personnel based, you're not missing anything.
If you recognize, I mean, I disagree a little bit, but that's beyond the point. I think if you recognize that something is where there's a missing ingredient, the only way to acquire it is to do something big and splashy, because those are the only assets you have. You have to, I mean, can you move Rob? Can you move Smart? Sure. But my guess is they might have more value to you than they're going to have in an open market. So you have to start looking at the 2 stars and say, maybe that's the thing. And that's why it goes there. I think people are like, oh, they lose and you want to trade Jaylen. No, they lose and you say, we might have to trade one of the 2 best players because that's the only way to get another good player in here that might change up how it works together. That's why I'm not having that conversation yet. I don't think you're there yet, but I do think it's really interesting, Bobby. Above all else, having done this as a career for 20 something years and having seen different teams at different times and win different things, I'm a fan of, above all else, stories. And coming back from 3-0 down is a great story and a great opportunity. I hate the cliche of, well, it's an opportunity, because they say that to convince themselves that there's no pressure, but there is pressure. And if you come through,
you have to do this.
If you come through, it's immortal. Okay. So it actually is a cool opportunity to see what you got, see what you're made of, change the narrative, redefine it.
No one's ever done it before.
No one's done it. Imagine riding that into the finals. Imagine wiping away this kind of stigma, this stank that you have over you as being soft, which is what they're being called right now, soft. They can get rid of that pretty quickly. If they don't, here you go. So it's fun. It's interesting. It's like it's an interesting story to see how it plays out. So I am obviously, like everybody else, super interested to see how they come out and how they respond.
Great story. I hate the Red Sox stuff, but on its own, it is a great story because you know what, John, they can do. Have you looked at FanDuel?
In terms of the line, Celtics are 8-point favorites again.
Not only that, but they're what, plus 225 to win the series?
Yeah.
I mean, that is not a long odd to come back down 0-3, which is something that no one's ever done before.
Yeah.
It's in play, especially now with the Vincent injury. And this is what I said after last show. yes, the win was great last night, and just win one and you're back in it and all that. But you look up and one of the guys who was killing you is barely able to walk on the other side. I don't think that's going to get much better over the next couple of days here.
Yeah. What
Things
I
changed. Everything changed in game 4. You're in this series now.
Yeah. What I will say is win or lose, if the core comes back, we always joke about the uncomfortable conversations. Forget uncomfortable conversations with each other. Somebody with a little bit of, um, you know, sack, gravitas, whatever, Brad, whomever, the next coach. And I do believe Joe will be fired. That's my opinion only. But I really do. I think if they go out here, I don't think Joe comes back. But someone's got to tell him what Ime was telling him last year about playing like assholes, but in a real sort of way. You coddle superstars because that's the business, and you're worried about job security and this and that. There are certain things these guys have to do differently, and they have to recognize and learn about themselves. Jason Tatum can't be entering year 8 and 9 not getting back on defense because he's throwing his hands up in the air and complaining about calls. Guys can't be taking trips off down the court, because
It's unacceptable.
It's really basic stuff. And I know like everyone will be like, shut up, they're superstars, other superstars do it. They do, but you don't love when they do it either. Like if you're built as a team and you're built to kind of win, the way they were built last year through effort and defense and this and that, it doesn't work if one or two people you can't have James Hardens on that type of team. You want to be a team where just talent wins out. You're going to have to live and die by that and recognize you're not going to get max effort all the time. And those teams go out a bit. How many champions do you have where you felt that every single player on the floor wasn't putting out the whole time? Zero.
Look at Denver right now.
Look at all of those teams. Go back and look at the title teams. How many of them have passengers, on them? None. It doesn't work that way. You can get far enough. You can get all NBAs and all-star appearances. And depending on matchups and injury luck, you can find your way in a bunch of conference finals. It doesn't mean shit. The teams that win it have no passengers. They don't have people who go to the podium and say, I didn't have play with effort tonight, which is what they were doing in the finals last year. So that doesn't exist. Okay, you don't win with those guys. You don't win when your stars are those guys. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Why do you think the same sad, lazy losers go home every year?
And John, I've said this all year. They don't look like champions to me, despite the talent. I've said all along they're going to fall a little short.
They got to redefine themselves. Yeah.
If they win it all, I'll have never seen a champion like that. Like the DVD will be like Traffic, or we didn't have that. Can you imagine? Like it just, what a championship team looks like, John. You've covered a million of them. All this stuff isn't there.
They don't back into them. One of the anomalous ones in my life was the last Patriots Super Bowl team. That didn't look like a championship team to me. Quarterback was unhappy. It looked a little dysfunctional.
You know what they're similar to though? Last year's Celtics, who yes had all these issues. All these issues still existed last year, but they had this monster defense that no one's ever seen before that was like, whoa, like this will be what's indicative of a champion here. This offense was really good this year, and I know the style of the game puts them in the all-time conversation. But after that 21-5 start, this wasn't a very special offensive unit. They're still very dysfunctional. And the defense, as good as it's been ranked at times, I think has just been dreadful at times. So I don't know.
It's the inconsistency. It's like I've used this analogy before, but like, you diet all day and you restrict what you eat, and then you have 2 tubs of ice cream at night. Like your diet was blown. Like you blew it. Like, why did you diet all day? Why play hard a little bit, but then like collapse and give the entire game away? You can't have at these points in the year 5-minute stretches, 6-minute stretches where you just stop. Other teams are going to take it, go on 19-2 run, and snatch your friggin' soul. It doesn't work that way. Like it's constant. It's every trip down. You just can't do it. Like, Jalen is going fourth in their careers, or will superstars like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum be expected to match up with the other team's best player and play 82 games of like lights out defense? The reality is no. That's why I'm not an
But no
anti
one's asking for that.
but that's why I'm not a load management guy. I don't give a crap about it. I'd rather you sit 15 games and play hard for 65 than go out there and just half-ass your way through it, chuck some threes, and then maybe try to play defense in the fourth quarter, late in the fourth quarter when the game is on the
Those
line.
are things
But
Warriors
when you
fans.
get to this point, there is no excuse for not going balls out. I don't
Yeah.
understand it.
And that's, that's what we're going to find out. Why
Yeah.
are all those intangible things missing? Why are they showing up to games without effort? Why are they not doing these little things in spite of those
Weird.
clearly being the things they need to do? And it's not
Yeah.
like Joe's not stressing those things. He talks about those things all the time. We can get into our scheme and basketball differences with Joe, which I think we have, but it's not like he's giving these guys a pass behind the scenes. Like I think he is getting into these guys and being tough on them in moments, but it's not resonating, or there's some sort of disconnect there in terms of how everyone feels they need to play or what they need to do on any given possession, or certain guys feel like they're above doing those little things. I don't know, but something's missing with this group. It's not talent. It's not, I think, personality stuff, which I think is getting thrown around a lot right now. I mean, that exists on you don't think this personality stuff on the Warriors?
Everywhere. The Warriors literally, are exactly, Bobby. I hate that shit too. Like, I don't believe these guys are like
These
super
guys
tight
don't,
knit.
these guys
Like,
don't like each other.
but I don't believe they don't like each other. There's no rancor. I just believe they kind of do. They go to the beat of their own drums. We even see it in shoot around, Bobby. You go to shoot around, you see who's hanging out with who's social with who. Like, it's very
That's normal,
clear.
though, to me.
That's how teams are. That's
What they
pretty
do on the
normal.
court with their talent isn't normal to me. It is
Right.
strange.
But the Golden State, who won the title last year, flat out said it was, that things might have been derailed by the, Draymond Green punch, which absolutely is true, and I think is 100% right. They didn't have trust. They had issues behind the scenes that definitely hurt them a little bit. But this team is not going to fail because they're not going to the club together. I don't think that that's necessarily it. Tatum and Brown, I mean, guys, stop. They're not friends. They don't like each other in the sense of like they're not, but they don't dislike each other. They're just fine. They're co-workers. They respect each other's games. That's the extent of it. They're not going down because of that. They're going down because there's something competitive. Look, I think it's better when you love each other, Bobby, because you're more likely to play for one another. They need to have enough professional respect for one another to recognize that, like, this isn't just you. It's everybody's opportunity. It's everybody's chance. You owe it to everyone around you. You owe it to the fans. I've always said, when fans use things like I don't admonish them at all. It is we. You guys own the team. The people in the uniforms are stewards. They're going to move on. You're going to be there forever. They owe it to you. They owe it to each other. It's just part of it. You want to get into Nick Gelso, Boomer, Nick, Celtic pride stuff. It's true. You either have pride, you go out there and you play. You have self-respect. You care about the organization, your teammates, the fans, and you do it, or you don't. Right now, it's kind of like I said, passengers, a little bit along for the ride at times. So buckle up, guys. I mean, it's the conference finals. Laying 2 eggs because you weren't mentally ready to play is sad to me,
Tonight's so huge. And they've been good on the road, so I don't think you're terribly worried about going to Game 6 in Miami.
No. You win tonight, everything is different.
Yeah, everything's different. And you have this opportunity, to use that word again, with Vincent out. I think that's huge. Yeah. Other guys, listen, like you said, Murray's been out, Embiid's been out. Those teams had other guys who can make up for it. The Heat are running out fast. Robinson has a bad game tonight and can't really play. All of a sudden, Hayward Highsmith's in. You gotta say his whole name, or else your tongue gets twisted. He hasn't played. It's like Hauser. So, I like their chances of integrating him and him playing well if they need to, but it's a challenge for them. Lowry's been so bad, and he's about to start. And Martin, who's been scorching all series, is probably going to come down to earth at some point. We talked about this, John, the shooting variances.
Yeah.
That's starting to flow in the direction you want it to if you're the Celtics.
Right.
And you got to take advantage of that. You can't lose the little things and undermine your shooting.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing it's simply the margin for error.
Yeah.
Over time, you would expect the Heat to cool off in the set, but one more game of Celtics cold, Heat hot, and it's over. You just hope you don't run into that. So you take care of your end and hope for the best. It's all you can do. I agree, it's an opportunity, and I'm going to keep hammering the same thing. You make these moments, where the moments make you. Right now, they define it by going out, and if they come back from 3-0 down, it's historic, and it says something about them. But if they go down, they have to look at them. They're really nowhere to look but inward. Again, you want to make excuses. The Heat are playing without three of their 7 top rotation players right now. Their second best offensive player, maybe third best overall player, Oladipo, who would really help them on the defensive end of things, and as with that second unit. And they've got current guys who are banged out, down with Vincent. You want to say, well, the coach and all of this stuff. I mean, you've played 18 playoff games without a single player missing a game. So enough. Like, there is no excuse for it except for what you chose to do. So we'll see. Bobby will be down there. I will be down there. We will.
By the way,
yeah,
Josue and I are going to hit the streets tonight. All these questions we want to hear from the fans. We're going to hit Causeway. If you're down there, come look for us and give us your thoughts.
Okay, sounds good. We are down. We will see you guys at the game tonight. After the game, make sure you check out the Garden Report again. Hoping it's not our last show. We do appreciate you guys hopping on middle of the afternoon with us. Once again, sign up FanDuel.com/Boston. Take advantage of a no sweat first bet up to 1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/Boston. We are out. Bobby Manning, John Zannis. We'll see you.